The only identity that is your true identity is I am God, I am divine. Everything else is outside layers. Everything else. The true identity is I am God. I am a reflection of the divine.
Welcome back to Religion to Reality, the podcast about living an integrated life. I'm your host, Dave Plisky, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Father John Gribowich. This season is all about how we as Catholics can listen to other faiths and other religions. And so that's what we're doing all throughout this season. And today marks our first episode with a Hindu. We're joined by Anju Bhargava, and I think that you're going to really enjoy this conversation that gives both an overview of what we're even talking about when we talk about Hinduism, as well as the practices that accompany it, and a lot of learning, I think, that we can take away, regardless of what faith tradition we're coming from. Anju Bhargava is a retired federal executive, former senior banker, and pioneering community builder with over 4 decades of experience developing multidimensional strategies to address critical issues in an interdependent global environment. She served as the first Chief Risk Officer at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Deputy Chief Strategy and Performance Officer at the Social Security Administration, and Senior Vice President at Bank of America. Her leadership across both the public and private sectors has advanced innovation, accountability, and systemic improvement. A Vedantic teacher and ordained Hindu minister and chaplain, Anju integrates philosophy and practice through a contemporary lens and is deeply engaged in interfaith collaboration. She was the only Hindu American appointed to President Obama's inaugural Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, where she founded Hindu American Seva communities to promote community service and social justice. She has also served on the Department of Homeland Security's Faith-Based Security and Communications Advisory Committee and was a White House Community Builder Fellow during the Clinton administration. Anju's community leadership includes service as a member of the Livingston Interfaith Clergy Association, founding member of the New Jersey Corporate Diversity Network, co-founder and former president of the first women's organization in North America, Asian Indian Women in America, and trustee of the Council for a Parliament of the World's Religions. She has launched numerous initiatives to foster inclusion and empowerment, including Asian Indians in Livingston, New Jersey, South Asians in Corporate America Forum in New York City, and South Asian women's leadership with the Asia Society in New York. Recognized as a visionary thought leader and community builder, Anju has published influential papers, received numerous awards, and created foundational infrastructures that continue to benefit diverse communities across the nation. Anju, wow, what a full life you've been living. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Yes, you are right. It has been a wonderful life.
That's great.
Well, can we just actually start? Where are you from? Like, just give us like the whole history of like where you grew up and then eventually.
Sure. I was born in India, and my father worked for a multinational company. So we traveled all over India, from the north to the west, east, and then we settled in the south. So I changed 7 schools. When I was 10 years old, that was the first time we moved from Lucknow, which was a Hindi-speaking place, to Calcutta, which was Bengali-speaking. And that's where I had my first cultural shock, because it was a completely different language. And it's like Europe with different countries. And when I was about 20 years old, I moved to America. I had just gotten married at that time. And I was fortunate enough to get into an MBA program at Rutgers, and I became a banker for many decades. I also became a single parent and brought up my daughter. When she was a year and a half old, she asked me why she looked different. And that is what caused me to go into my, to understand who am I, where do I come from, what are the values that I want to pass on to this child who is born in America, who is now an American of Indian origin, and how do we integrate into this country? Because I came in the late 70s, so we were still in the early stages of adapting over here as a community. And I didn't have many role models. So my daughter sort of got me started. And fortunately, my upbringing, I went to Catholic schools for the majority of my education. I did go to, for 2 years, I went to Protestant schools, French Protestant school in Calcutta, actually. And I grew up as a Hindu in India. So all of that really helped me to figure out how I can help my daughter and myself sort of develop and grow in America. And as you pointed out earlier, it's been a wonderful journey.
That's great. So you mentioned that you grew up Hindu, and my understanding is that the idea of Hinduism is almost is kind of a Christian idea, a word for what was
Right.
happening when Europeans kind of came to the subcontinent.
No, it's not a Christian word.
Okay.
People who in India are very diverse. Our tradition is called Sanatana Dharma. That means universal way of life. When the invaders started coming around, starting from 323 BC is when Alexander the Great came. And then that was followed by the Mongols and the Turks and so on from the northwest side of India. There is a river which is in today's Pakistan called Sindhu. They couldn't pronounce the word sir, so they called it Hindu. So we were people who lived west of the river Sindhu, and that's how the word Hindu came into being. And it was a geographic encompassing many different traditions. There is no one tradition. And as others came, they just called us Hindus. But the root of most Eastern tradition is our ancient texts, Vedantic texts, which were written thousands and thousands of years ago. And the way it is adapted and practiced is very diverse. And then over time, we've had many leaders, many gurus who have come and taken different aspects of it and emphasized that more than the other and created their own version of it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the Vedantic texts as the mother source, so to say, for the diversity that we have and the way Hinduism is expressed in today's world.
And do people's expression of Hinduism, whatever their particular tradition is that typically based on whatever how their parents practice, and or is it more regional? Because I wonder it because you said you moved around so much. I wondered if your practices had changed throughout that time.
Yes. Well, it's not. It's hard to put it in Judeo-Christian terms because we didn't have a founder per se of the broad Hinduism or Vedantic Hinduism, as we like to clearly clarify its connection with its root. So over time, many learned people had added to the library of books that we have, which comprise our many, many scriptures. And they told the same thing in different ways in the ancient times. And they were very analytical. They studied astronomy, astrology. Many of the way we do things are all connected with the astrophysics and very science and religion is actually all integrated in the way it was presented to us. But over time, we had many invasions. And we had a lot of Muslim, rule especially in the northern part, starting from about 6th century AD until about 15th century, when the Europeans discovered India. Columbus wasn't coming to America; he was really going to India, because India at that time was called the Golden Goose, because Indians traded with Greeks and with the world as it was at that time. And even in the far west, Indonesia, all the way to Indonesia, but they wanted payment in gold. So it was called the Golden Goose, and the spice trade was there, and Columbus came to the west. But then others discovered. Vasco da Gama from Portugal came, and then the British came. And they really came to trade with East India Company. The French came, the Dutch came. So the Europeans who were colonizing the rest of the world, we had the presence of all of them there. And I think we were quite advanced. We had temples which were very intricate, literature that was there, and colonization from different people brings about that we are superior to you. So there was, starting with the Muslim rule, a lot of conversion that took place. And then when the British came, there was that influence also. And just to add a little bit of historical aspect, since we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of America's independence, the person who lost the war here in America went to India and wanted to get his honor because the British were already there. And there were a few kings who had held out for many, many years. And it was that person, Robert Clive, who went there and sort of defeated the Indians. So that is the Indian American connection, that the person who lost the war here won colonization, won India for the British.
Interesting.
Actually,
It's interesting. I was fascinated by all that interconnection of the global interconnection that has always been there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So let's focus on Hinduism really quick a little bit more, because it's such a fascinating religion. No founder, as you mentioned, it's, I believe, considered to be the oldest known religion that's still practiced. So how does that work within the system of not really having a central figure to kind of rally around as being inspired? Although, as you said, there are lots of gurus, so there's maybe like a lot of like local figures. But how does that work out?
They're supposed to be teachers, teaching the texts, generally speaking. Buddha, for example, came out from being a Hindu, but he never wanted to be revered as a person, which the way we practice it is very different all over the world. But it was meant to be a way of life, that God is within, that everything you do it for your, what we consider salvation is moksha, for your freedom from birth and rebirth. So some of those fundamental things are common throughout India, but the expression of it is different. The Vedantic literature that was there was very advanced. And the learned rishis recognized that people are not going to grasp such high level philosophy, that they needed tangible symbols to hold on to. So we have one God, which is universal, which is everywhere. But in order to bring the qualities of that one God, to make it be tangible for people, symbols were created over time. And those became the deities that we focus on for a particular aspect. So many of them they're very common across, like Ganesh. That is removal of obstacle. It is also the deity for the first chakra in the human, from a yogic perspective, for increasing your understanding, that first you have to control your lower base sense instincts as you grow up. So there was a lot of interconnection and understanding of the symbols that represented the deities that we have. And different regions of India have chosen different deities to emphasize more. And that's where the diversity in the Hindu tradition comes in. In Calcutta, for example, it's the feminine aspect, Kali, which is revered more. In Maharashtra, it is the Ganesh that I had mentioned, which is more. The South they have some communities look at Shiva. So our Trinity is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, which is not just the form, it's also how, from a scientific perspective, when you breathe in, that's the creative aspect. So that's called Brahma. The breath goes in and sustains the body. The sustaining part is called Vishnu. And then there's constructive destruction. What comes out is Shiva aspect. That's the philosophical aspect of it with which they try to showcase through the deities. But again, different people took different deities and made that be the focus of their devotion. And in our tradition, you can worship how you want, whichever form you want. You're not tied to it. Years ago, I had gone to a conference in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. Himalayan Institute of Yogic Science and Philosophy had done that. And it was a conversation about Eastern and Western aspects of devotion, a worship that in the West or in the Abrahamic traditions, it's much more structured, the way of worship, the church life, and so on. In the Eastern tradition, you could worship however you want. However, the society was much more structured. Whereas in the West, the society was not so structured. And what is happening today in both East and West, both sides are getting to be unstructured. But we were recognizing that human beings need both structure and freedom. So our freedom came in the worship aspect, that you could worship however you want.
What does worship look like in your life? What did it look like growing up, and what does it look like now? I say that just because I imagine that it must be a bit different moving from India to America, where it's not nearly as ubiquitous.
I consider myself a born-again Hindu American.
Mm-hmm.
So my way of it's not different in India or here, but it's where you are in your own development and evolution. The deities and all of that were there, and then there are different steps. We have 16 steps of the way you do a puja or the worship, or in which you are actually bringing the deity in as a form, and you welcome as you would a guest. And in the olden traditions, you wash their feet and hands and gave them water to drink and food and clothes, and then you said goodbye to them. So that's the puja aspect of it, in which you are basically bringing that energy into your focus and like a friend, and treating it as a friend.
Is that like a daily thing, or how often are you doing something like that?
And see, it all depends. There are people who do it daily, people who do it on a special occasion.
Okay, yeah.
And you may do the full thing. You may do you can do it in however way you want. But that is what they the way of doing it. I have to add that our tradition, and the reason why I talked about the different invasions and stuff, was that our way of life was very fractured. The studies, when the different Mughal invasions happened, they burnt the universities. Like Buddha's doctor over 2,000 years ago had studied in Nalanda University. And even today, when I was in Thailand with the Chinese and Thai medicine, his statue was there as an acknowledgement that he came and he taught. But that university was burnt. It took 6 months for all those books to be burnt, because they, just like Afghanistan, what we have seen with the statues, that's exactly what had happened 2,000 years, 1,500 years ago in India. So a lot of knowledge got lost. And different areas preserved the knowledge, The South preserved it much more in its original form because it was not subjugated by the Muslims for a very, very long time. And they were the Chola kings who traveled to the Far East, to Vietnam and Cambodia. And that's why we see Hindu temples in all those places over there. Even in Indonesia, Bali is a Hindu place. So all of Southeast Asia, they had traveled. There was a lot of communication between India and Greeks and that part of the world up till Spain, I think, the world that was developed at that time. There is a very good book that William Dalrymple has written about the Golden Road, talking about some of these aspects of Indian influence all over, the Hindu influence in many parts of the world. So with the British, Hindu way of life was under the control of the British. The temples were all under their domain, and they allocated funds. So they took all the money from most of the temples. They took that, and it was under their governance. And even today, certain temples, especially in the South, are under the domain of the government. So there is not so much freedom in the way the temples are. Temple priests can do. They can just do what they have, the traditional aspects, but it's limited. And I say that because that then became part of the overall people. We didn't have really a structured education forum to study Hinduism. The funding was not there. Before, the kings would give funding to the priests and to the teachers to teach, but all that got fractured. And different people have tried to revive, like Swami Chinmayanand, who recognized that Hindus need to learn about Hinduism themselves, and many other people. So to bring the understanding of what they were doing, the rituals got left behind. People were doing whatever their parents had told them to do or what they had seen in the surrounding environment to do. But the connection between why they were doing it, how they were doing it, was all fractured. But in America, fortunately, we have been able to recreate, and we have. I have learned a lot here about my own tradition and culture with books from there and just discussions that we've had that now we are transplanted here, and we've had to think through what do we want to pass on, and we have to make it be explainable to our children and grandchildren now, because they're not going to do what we did in India, that you just do whatever your elders are telling you to do. You have to explain to them. So I think there's a little bit more structure that has come in here, in which there are educational places that one can go to. And I didn't have one when I was bringing my daughter up, and I tried to be a teacher, and I was learning and teaching her at the same time, because even I had not grown up being taught this is how you do it. And we did try to follow this, that it's great over here that there is a Sunday school and way of teaching the children. So that has become more popular here. I've left India nearly 50 years ago, so I'm not that familiar with everything that goes on in India, but I think there is a lot of effort over there also to bring more of the education and more of the understanding behind the rituals.
I think we would agree. I mean, for any of us who know a little bit about Hinduism, the idea of Brahman and Atman seem to be so foundational. So is that first off, is that true? Secondly, could you explain to us what those terms mean to you, especially?
Sure, I will. Yeah.
And actually also how you participate in them too, maybe, if that makes sense.
Okay. So Brahman, so there is Brahmand.
Okay.
Brahmand means the entire universe, not just the earth, but the entire universe.
Mm-hmm.
and that God pervades everything. Brahman, there is no place in which God does not exist. It's just God is there everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Atma, from the way I've understood it, and I should be very clear that this is me, 1 out of 1 billion people speaking, but this is what I have understood, that Atma is the individual soul. But it is always connected with the universal soul, the Paratma, as we call it, the higher
Mm-hmm.
self, the universal self. That
Mm-hmm.
we are like the sun is always there. We are the reflected rays of the sun. Without the connection with the sun, we have no light. So we are an expression of the divine. So divine resides within us. So
Mm-hmm.
the Atma is that aspect of the divine which is individualized
Mm-hmm.
in this body.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful way of expressing it. One ways that because I've taught comparative religions before, and I was saying, like, in some ways, maybe the Atman is like the portal, the individual portal into the Brahman. It's a way to be able to understand your role participating within it, but it's not something that's not it, and it's also not something that is it at the same time too.
So
So,
the word Brahman has a person can be a Brahmin.
mm,
So we had what we call jatis or clans, but there was a division of labor. The teachers traditionally were the Brahmins.
mm,
The Kshatriyas were the arms. So if one visualizes humans in the body, the head was the Brahmin. The
mm,
arms were the Kshatriyas or the soldiers, and they were the kings. The Brahmins were not really kings. They were always under the patronage of the Brahmin. Yeah, they were under the patronage of the king, who was the Kshatriya. Then the traders and those who went, did the business and did all the work, they were called the Vaishyas, and they were the legs. And those who were supporting were the Shudras. Over time, there was discrimination, and it wasn't intended to be when it started out in that way. And yes, people were ostracized for which group they belonged to. But a lot of social engineering also happened in India during the British rule. So like when I got married, up till my daughter, everybody was from the clan. You married within the clan, the Bhargava clan, in my case. Today we don't. People marry. It was a different way of functioning. There
mm.
was pluralism. Everybody lived together, yet you lived within your clan for your family matters, and then you dealt with others for trade and so on.
Do you prefer the word clan rather than caste? Is that something
They're
that
two different things. The word caste is a Portuguese word. It's
okay?
not a Hindu, it's not from our tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is how it was introduced into the West, because the conquerors are the ones who told our story. So yes, there was this division of labor, and even, and that's a universal division of labor. We have our people who are in the army and so on. That is not how we functioned in society. At one level, we functioned with that because that was what your work was. But yes, there was discrimination, and people who were the lowest caste were treated differently. And that is a social degradation that happened. It had nothing to do with religion.
Interesting.
Nothing to do
Yeah.
with the Vedantic aspect that you're supposed to treat people like that. one of our most sacred, which has become the sacred book, which is the Gita, which really summarizes all the Vedantic teachings. In that, Krishna is the teacher, and in our tradition, it was teacher-student relationship. You were not a believer. You didn't have to believe things. You had to understand. You asked questions, and there was nothing which you could not ask questions about. And in that, he explains what I had mentioned earlier about the body, the Brahmin being the head, and the Kshatriyas being the arms, the warriors, and then the tradespeople doing the work, being the legs, and then the Shudra. And in the text, it also says that we are born Shudra. That means we are born at the lowest level. But by our actions, we become born again as a Brahmin or whatever. That it is our actions that dictate who we are, not what our position in life is. But I think in today's world, the caste in interior villages and stuff, it might be, they might be still following it. But by and large, more in India, and nobody really follows it. And in India, they have instituted so much of corrective action that in colleges, in government jobs, so many seats are reserved for those who are of the lower caste that it's become difficult for anybody who is in the higher caste, so to say, a Brahmin, to get a seat, even if you have like 90% marks. So there's a lot of social engineering that has gone on. It went on before. Now it's being changed, and the pendulum swings one way, the other, and then somewhere people will find the balance. But the West sees us as caste cow curry. So I might as well tackle those, the cow aspect of it, that the cow was sacred because it provided so much to the agricultural society in which people lived in. And there is nothing in the original text, that says that you have to be a vegetarian.
Oh.
The kings would kill the game, and the best was given to the Brahmins at one point in time. Later on, when Jainism started and others, that's about the same time as Buddha, around that 2,500 years ago, that's when vegetarianism came into existence. So, and people follow it, the family traditions, people follow things. But for me, it was very interesting to go back and read, and to go and read the original text and say, oh, the things that we considered were so sacred, originally they were not. This is all human beings have put their own spin to all this. Not that wasn't a spin also, but people change and modify things to suit themselves.
Yeah, I think you'll see that in all religions in some way. I mean, clearly there's things that we see in Catholicism as being so sacrosanct, and they're really kind of just like at best a later addition or an incidental thing. But since it's so ingrained within the cultural practice, it becomes like, well, you can't touch that. I mean, like, for example, I mean, the Mass was in Latin for so many years, right? And like that was, but now that's not considered to be normative. I mean, but Jesus wasn't himself speaking Latin anyway, so at least from what we know, So I mean, like that kind of thing. I mean,
exactly.
But
yeah.
You mentioned the human aspect of like what changes over time, and I wondered if the Vedantic texts, are they considered to be divinely inspired, or are they just kind of the pinnacle of human wisdom, or how do you think about those?
So, yes, divinely inspired through human beings, that they were the conduit for the knowledge that came, and they wrote that. And and different people added to it. Um, they generally did not add their name to it. So we don't have names of people who wrote whatever, but it was supposed to be that what we've understood is that the rishis were in deep meditation, and this knowledge came, and they wrote it, and then they analyzed it, like Kama Sutra, for example. That was about love, and yes, sex was there, but it was a whole thing, and they actually analyzed it and then studied it. So they were scientists and wrote a whole treatise on that aspect of it. Then there were mathematicians who, before Pythagoras, that particular theorem, they had actually identified it. They knew what the earth was round. Much before it, that was all in the text, but all that was suppressed because we were colonized people. Aesop's fables, that comes from Panchantantras, and that's called the fifth Veda. There are four Vedas, main Vedas, that the king's sons were very stupid. They had no wisdom, and the king wanted his son to be wise enough to rule. So a particular teacher came and put the stories in animal formats to help them understand the wisdom. The original texts are supposed to be sacrosanct. There were many, but there are, I think, the four major texts left now, the Vedas. And then there are explanations of it, and more explanations of it. And then people take that and then try to explain it in today's life.
Right.
But they are considered, you don't change the original. You can explain what it is, and your interpretation may be different.
Right. And I'm also continue to be curious about the practices. So you mentioned the prayers
Right.
that you took us through, and you talked a little bit about the temples for a minute. So
Okay.
I'm curious.
So, okay.
So I have a couple questions. Like how much are the temples involved in an active Hindu's life? Where do Hindus kind of meet their gurus, and I wonder also how much yoga plays a part in all of this.
Okay. See, it's all integrated.
Yeah.
The temple was supposed to be, it was called mandir. Man means your own consciousness, going inside your consciousness. So historically, it was built in proportion to a human being, that you enter in, and then where the deity was kept was like your third eye, the inner vision. It was kept over there. So it was all symbolic that you're going in. The temple does the rituals. The priests over there do the rituals. The priests are not necessarily the teachers. They are professionals. They do the puja, as that aspect of it, the traditional aspect of it, because things were divided into different functions. They do the karam kand, which is the action oriented for prayers. The teaching is done by swamis and gurus, and one has to be careful, in which guru, and then you have your own family gurus, and then that becomes sacrosanct, kind of. But the swamis the teachers did the teaching, which was separate from the temple, and they had ashrams for it. Ashram was a place where traditionally you would go and stay there and learn from the teacher from the age of like 7 or 8, and then come back when you were educated at 17, 16, 17 or so, and come back and then start your life. And again, as I said, the society was very structured. So there were 4 phases of life. You were a student, you were a brahmacharya. That means you were chaste, you were supposed to just study and develop yourself. Then you became a householder, and that the entire community dependent on a householder, the person who was the earning person. You maintained the family, you maintained the teachings, the teachers, the religious aspect, and the communal. So that was your role that was the second role, the most important one on which the entire society stood on. Then third was Vanprasth, which is that, okay, now I'm done with my life work. I have contributed to the society. I leave it and I go. Vanprasth meant they literally left their homes and went into the forest for spiritual growth now and education in an ashram or something. Then you are not so much involved with the rituals, because ritual was basically going to a temple and doing the puja was for action-oriented cleansing to prepare you for the higher philosophical aspects of education. The fourth stage was sannyasi, where you left everything and you became a monk, whether you were a householder or not. Now, it didn't have to be all linear. People skipped. They could just become a sannyasi and leave everything behind and not be in the world, so to say. But they were encouraged to be in the world, because otherwise, how will society move on? You have to earn and you have to take care of things. So those were the four phases in which you moved and your learning changed. Women traditionally were not taught the higher philosophies early on. The feeling was that if they spend time in just meditation, who will do the housework? So it was more for division of labor was a big thing, I think, from how I have understood it, of everybody having a role to play so that the society could function. And that's why we had the hierarchies. That your job is this, you do this. Once you've finished all this, and women after menopause, once they're done with it, they can go and do whatever they want, because by then the children are grown up and they don't have to be so involved in running the household, to say.
We can't all be blacksmiths here. Okay. Like we need
Right.
some people to actually go and, figure
Right.
things out.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. And how does yoga relate in all that?
So yoga means the union of the soul with the higher self. That's what yoga means. It is an integral part of the philosophy of Hinduism. That what we see outside in the world as Hatha yoga is only the physical aspects to train the body in order to be able to sit and meditate.
Mm-hmm.
So that without this body, you can't do anything. The body is essential. So we had, this thing is sacred, this thing is sacred. On the 11th day, you kept a fast, according to the tradition, so that for 24 hours, you didn't eat anything, or at least 12 hours, you didn't eat anything. So it gave the body time to rest. All that was integrated into the ritual, into the rituals, into the way of living. So Hatha yoga is doing the asanas and all of that, is training your body and mind, and the body-mind connection was like this, was very intricate. So if you take care of the body, you are taking care of the mind also. There are 5 yoga paths as they say in Bhagavad Gita, that of bhakti, of devotion, of Raja Yoga, which is of action, that you're aspiring towards the union, or you already are one with the divine. But for you to realize it yourself, there are different ways of doing it based on your personality. If you are somebody who is very devoted to a particular form of deity, then bhakti may be the more essential one. Then there is gyan, which is knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I forget the other. They're just escaping my mind.
That's helpful, though. Okay.
But there are these different paths, and it doesn't mean that they are exclusive, that you follow one track or the other. There is an overlap, but one may be more towards your personality.
Right.
And the physical aspects, as I said, is to help you strengthen the body, because without the body you cannot attain moksha, which means that you get beyond the cycle of birth and rebirth.
So in a lot of this, you had been saying, that this was the way, or traditionally this is how it was, and it made me think of just what's happening in the church these days, where people are not, the church is not facilitating a true encounter with God, and it's causing people to find going to church irrelevant. Right. And we're seeing people stop, they stop practicing these traditions because they just don't see how it changes their life one way or the other.
Right.
And I wondered if Hinduism is experiencing something similar, because you sound like you were saying kind of it's in the past, or it's traditionally, or something like that.
What has happened? Vivekananda was the first Hindu monk to come to America in 1893. And he started this, I'm spiritual but not religious, kind of a movement when he gave his talk at the first Parliament of World Religions. Again, in the Hindu concept tradition, we got fixated on the rituals, on how we should do this, and you must do this, and you must do that, and on this day do that, without the understanding. And that's where the fractured nature of our history played a role in us losing more and more the understanding, to a point where people feel that it's irrelevant. What's the point of saying something in Sanskrit? I don't understand the language. But if you really understood the root of it, you would the word from its root, which is from Sanskrit, you would understand the full meaning of it. Just like many words are from Latin, you would understand the fuller meaning of it. Over time, also what happened was that meditation played less of a role in the Hindu society. And today meditation has become much more. Our texts talk about it, but the practice of it was not forced by society so much, because it became more ritualistic. And today people are getting more connected with trying to integrate the philosophy with the practice, because especially for us in North America and here, we cannot expect our children to do anything, because they're not in an environment in which they can just observe and see everybody else doing it. So they have to be explicitly explained to them, and they have to see the relevance of it. And so it's a much more shorter form of whatever they would do in India, but it's enough to understand the basics of where the tradition, and to be self-reflective, and to learn all the values, the common values that are there to be a good human being in existentially.
I really do see there are so many people who are getting serious about the spiritual life, serious about meditation, integrating that into one's life. And of course, we know that yoga is very popular. And all this points to the East, particularly India, as being like the source for all these things, the source for like how to live this integrated life that's so aware of one's own spiritual aspect as being not just an aspect, but being fundamentally who we are. So how do you see that as being a gift that really all people ought to be listening to, or at least being somewhat receptive to? Because it does seem that Hinduism, being, let's just say, the first of religions, let's just call it that, provides a wellspring for us to understand something about who we are in relationship to the cosmos, and most importantly, our spiritual nature. Does that resonate with you? And does that motivate you in a way to kind of be able to help people recognize that within themselves based on what you have experienced in your practice of Hinduism?
You mean people, Hindu people or non-Hindu
I
people?
would say non-Hindu. I would say everyone. I don't think this is a religious thing. I think it's more of a human thing that
Right.
that people are trying to, connect with,
Right. Thank you for saying that, because in truth, Sanatana Dharma, which is the original name of Hinduism, is a universal way of life.
Mm.
It was not tied to any ism per se. It
Hmm.
never was an ism.
Hmm.
It became an ism because of what others said. This is who you are now, and this
Right.
is you are now, you're Hindus, and this is Hinduism. It's not comparable to the Abrahamic traditions in that way, because its goal was always find God within yourself. Here are different ways in which the realized beings have uh, you can read their experiences, but ultimately you have to do it yourself. Nobody else can do it for you. Nobody will take you up to heaven. If you want to go to that, and it's in your consciousness, you have to work on yourself. So that is where, and what has happened is that yoga now has become the vocabulary. And I'm a trained yoga teacher. I went to University of Maryland School of Medicine and studied there. I was amazed. I was the only Indian to be there, because I guess Indians learn, they don't go to University of Maryland for that. But I was amazed to see how much of the yoga philosophy and the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which are pure philosophy explaining the truths, the fundamental truths of existence, how many people are into it,
Mm.
and how much it is there, and how much it has spread in America. As somebody who came when, as I said, we were starting out, and I was trying to figure out what will happen with my child, and will she have this. America is different. It's, at least my experience. Yes, there are some people who don't accept, but a lot of people accept, and they're open to all. My grandchildren have celebrated. They go to a Presbyterian. They went to Presbyterian pre-nursery school, and they celebrated Diwali and Holi, and those holidays are there. But that's the religious aspect of it, and we are trying to connect. When I served in President Obama's advisory council, I tried to use that platform to help energize service, and help our people see service and philosophy combine. That today Hinduism has become an expression of festivals. It's
Mm.
eat, drink, and be merry, kind of.
Mm.
You celebrate Diwali, you do this, you eat this, you
Hmm.
make this, and so on. That there is all this philosophy behind it. One of the best practices of Christianity, in my opinion, is during Christmas, there is a whole effort to serve. And that is something that I wanted to emphasize more, connected with the festivals. And we have, and in America, during some festivals, many of the groups have picked that up, and they are doing seva during service during the festivals. And mine was to open everything, and the first thing we did was yoga in the temples and bring people of all traditions and come in, and we did that, and that is happening. So the service aspect, understanding aspect is very important. And I feel that we are learning from each other so much that there are some aspects that, yes, it's the country of origin. For it was developed there. Then we add our own masala to it here in America, all different people, and increase the understanding better. So we can say and give, just like in Thailand, they honor the teacher. We can honor the teacher, but then it becomes ours,
Mm.
right? And we take it forward then.
That's really beautiful. I really, really love that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the President Obama's advisory council work, because I was curious about that, and I wanted to talk more about your experience just in interfaith community work in general. Um, what do you think is important about interreligious dialogue, and what makes it challenging? What have you found most difficult about it?
From my perspective, mine was that I come from an environment which is non-organized religion. I do not have the structures, the infrastructures that established organizations have here.
Mm,
The way this country works, and the role that organized religion plays here, I can't replicate that because ours is decentralized.
mhm.
Because we never had one particular person. And even the ashrams that we have, which are run by, say, under a guru, but each satellite is its own. Each swami becomes his own. That is his kingdom. He can teach. He's connected with a mothership, but he can go off and do whatever he wants. So that was a big challenge for me during the Obama time. I had to recreate everything on my own, whatever I wanted to do. And but it was also an open slate, because now you can pick and choose what you want to do and how you want to do it. So we spent a lot of time in, and I think service is the common ground. And I know I'm using words that have been used before, but it's the common ground in which people can come together.
Mhm.
And I think as I am, the longer I've lived over here and I've seen the growth of yoga community, yoga as a tradition, yoga, that also can bring people together.
Mhm.
Because now when we practice yoga and even when we study it, we, it is part of Hindu tradition, but there is no conversion associated with it. You don't become a Hindu just because you're doing yoga
Right,
and
right,
studying
right.
the Bhagavad
No,
Gita
I
and
know
all
I
of
know
that.
very conservative Catholics who, maybe don't touch certain things, but they're
Right.
happy to do yoga. So clearly this is, yeah.
Exactly. So it has transcended universe, and that's what Sanatana Dharma was.
Hmm.
In its pure form, it is not, it is just a way of living for human beings, for to self-realize
Hmm.
and know I am that I am. Really know I am that I am.
Hmm.
And that is what Aham Brahman is. I am that I am.
Mm. It's interesting because that's how God identifies himself to Moses, right? In the
Right.
Bible, I am
Right.
who I am, or I am who I am.
I am that
Uh,
I am. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It actually it makes me think of something you said earlier. You were talking about how, and I guess this is a little bit karmic, if I'm understanding that concept. But you were talking about how we each have our the ability to take control of our lives and make something of ourselves, and and that that what we choose to do is how we understand who we are, and like
Right.
that the doing has something to do with the being. Can you say more about that? Because the reason I bring this up is because um uh one of the ways that I've understood when people process um themselves, I guess what I'm trying to say is when people um um lack compassion for themselves, we often do we think about guilt and we think about shame. And the way that I've heard it explained is that guilt is a behavior level thing where I have done something wrong and I feel bad about that. And shame is an identity level thing where it's like I am something bad and I feel bad about that. And that it's really important for people not to conflate guilt and shame, because guilt can be appropriate. If you did something
Right.
bad, you should feel bad about it. But at the end of the day, you are always a child of God. And so you really should never feel bad about your identity. We should
Right.
like shame. And so I wanted to unpack that a little bit with you about how actions and identity are related.
So in our philosophical, without any bias or anything, the only identity that is your true identity is I am God, I am divine. Everything else is outside layers. Everything else. So the true identity is I am God. I am. You won't say God. I am a reflection of the divine. You know, in terms of the emotional aspect, in fact, I was just listening to Swami Paramananda, one of our teachers, who I love because it's very pure. It said, the Gita is how to be an observer. It doesn't matter what emotion is. The emotion is when you're reacting to something and there is an emotional reaction to it. When there is an emotional reaction to anything, then you're coming from a state of the individual instead of coming from that place of peace where you are. When you are in a place of peace, when you're an observer, you're just watching everything that is happening. But when you get involved with it and when you start reacting to it, that's when the reactions come. So the way to unravel all of that is to become an observer. And that's where meditation comes in this,
Right.
is that all mental states in which we are in, we can give it different names to it, but what they show is that we are not coming from that place of I am that I am, Aham Brahman.
Okay. And yeah, that's great. And
That is
so,
in its pure form. That's not how we normally, but as a human being, we get involved with the emotions.
right. And that's good. Yeah, that's, I guess that's I'm hearing in that the Christian reflection that, not as God sees, do humans see, right? We're trying to, right. But I've
Exactly.
also heard you say that the first step of anything is empathy. So it sounds like
Right,
we can't just
right,
observe, right?
right.
Once we see clearly, then we can act. And that's where the service
But
comes in, right?
uh, 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 empathy without getting yourself involved with it. Have
Mm,
compassion. What Buddha and Christ say, have compassion, but that doesn't mean that you get into it. You
interesting.
you keep you the compassion is I just understood the meaning of love in a very nice way as I was listening to this talk, that love is being balanced yourself and being available for the other person to do whatever is needed for the other person in a compassionate way, recognizing, okay, this is where they are, I'll do it, but being balanced yourself.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting. Okay. That's interesting. Um, I want to end with a question that we've been asking many of our guests.
Sure.
I mentioned to you that this whole season was inspired by the idea that how listening is sacred.
Right.
And so I wanted to ask you, how do you cultivate, and not just listening, but any listening, but listening without agenda, right? Trying not to bring
Right.
something else
Yeah.
to it. So I wondered, how do you cultivate a posture of listening without agenda?
For me now, meditation is the way.
Mm,
And I follow a technique called Vipassana, which teaches you to become an observer.
mm,
That you and to be really aware, be in the present moment. So that when you are in the present moment and you're listening to that person with a balanced mind, without reacting to what the person is saying, just listening to that and responding to what that person is saying and helping, or having a dialogue, even having a dialogue with that person, but not um, getting carried away in it.
yeah. How do you sustain the place that you get to in meditation when you're in all the other times of your day when you're not in meditation?
It's practice.
Yeah.
And uh, I had a French Jewish teacher also at one time, and she would say, you need to break out of your trance. We get so caught up in a trance, you are, and sometimes you don't get out of it um, as quickly. So another teacher of has had coined the word FIR, frequency, intensity, and recovery.
Okay.
As you practice more, the frequency of your getting into that state becomes less, intensity reduces, and you're able to recover faster. So that is the only real measure of your progress. How did how quickly were you able to get your balance back? That is all about
You mean
being
in the face of a negative
in the face of
situation
any negative or even positive.
okay.
Even if it is positive, if you get carried away with that, then you are in the so this Buddha says in Bhagavad Gita says there is rag and there's dvesh. There is this desire for something and you want it, or you don't want it. Those are two things that go on at the same time. Either I'm craving for something or I'm rejecting something.
Okay.
Both add to your misery. So, in order to get out of misery completely, of dukkha, of any sorrow, you neither crave something nor reject something.
You find the non-dual third option.
You find that option of being balanced and saying, if I get it, you make all the effort. And that's where the karam yoga part comes in. You have to make all the effort, but the fruits of your labor are left to the hands of the divine. You cannot control an outcome like that. You do the best you can, and whatever you get is the offering from God.
Right.
And accept it as what you get it.
Right.
Also, there is the Karam Yoga is actually what in the Bible is, as you sow, so shall you reap. That's the philosophy of Karam Yoga.
Right.
That whatever you do, and in our case, if you don't correct it in this life, you'll be blessed to come back again and again and again until you correct it. So you might as well do the right thing now rather than taking it, coming back with it.
Yeah, but no, what you're saying is it totally resonates with the Christian idea of
right.
Cooperation with grace, kind of that type of thing.
Right.
And then surrendering, right?
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely.
There are people who've thought, and you might have heard that when Christ was 40 days or whatever period of time when he was not there, that he was in India.
I've heard that.
And there was evidence that he was in Kashmir and in the east, Orissa, a white yogi. He was called a yogi. That's why we revere Jesus Christ as a great teacher, as a great yogi, because his teachings and stuff are very similar to what we are, just in a different language and in a different way of presenting it, but they're very similar to it. Anyway,
no, that's great.
Just an aside.
And the church just started to catch up to this too. We finally from Vatican II, we have the kind of institutional blessing that whatever is wise and good. Yeah. Oh, that too. Yeah. Hopefully it was great. But I just maybe anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is it's great to have this dialogue with you. And
yeah, I'm happy to continue, whether you like this or you have a question about Hinduism and you just want to give me a shout. I don't have a problem with it.
Thank you, Anju. This was really great. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, no, it was great to have you.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, I really appreciated how clear Anju Bhargava was as she explained these different practices and rituals and so forth within Hinduism and her experience of Hinduism, and is clearly just an open person who is seeking the divine, who is experiencing the divine. I was just very gratified for this conversation. And we wanted to do more episodes in the Hindu arc, just given how many Hindus there are in the world. India is there's like a billion, I think, of them. And yes, that is inclusive of kind of everything we mean by that falls under the Hinduism umbrella. So there's that. I would have loved to have more voices. We tried to get a couple others, but in the end, we really just have one more person next week, who, a little bit like when we heard from Gabriel Reynolds at the end of the Islam arc that just finished before this, where a Catholic kind of came in to help contextualize things. That's what we're going to have next time as well, with another Notre Dame, actually a professor emeritus this time. His name is Bradley Malkowski, and he is going to help contextualize Hinduism for us in sort of the Catholic context next time. So we'd definitely love to have you join for that one as well. Religion to Reality is more than just a podcast. It is also an interfaith monthly gathering that meets once a month on the first Wednesday of the month. So you can find out more about that by heading over to our Substack, which is religiontoreality.substack.com, or just search for the Religion to Reality Substack. Religion to Reality was created and executive produced by me, Dave Plisky, and is produced and edited by Nick Stropoli and Connor Donnelly. You can find the show notes and other resources at religiontoreality.org. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.